with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America. Downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, faculty advisor at Columbia's School of International and Public Affairs, new media task force. Author of Shadow Network, Media, Money, and the Secret Hub of the Radical Right. Ann Nelson will be here. Also on the program, Bill Barr. And the Republicans have a Maddie that the DOJ Inspector General investigation finds that the 2016 probe of Trump was legit. Meanwhile, an ex-top Ukraine official says they knew of the aid freeze back in July of 2018. And following Zuckerberg's White House meeting, Trump threatens a trade war with France to stop tech companies' tax there. Meanwhile, Turkey threatens to block NATO Baltic defense plan over the Kurds in Syria. And Beto, remember that guy? He's working to flip the Texas State House.
Well done, Beto.
Brendan may have been right. This guy could be looking at the governor race. Meanwhile, Representative Duncan Hunter, fresh off of throwing his wife under the bus, now decides to plead guilty and leave Congress to corruption charges.
I feel like I was just getting to know him.
Yeah. That's 2 for 2 on the top first two guys to endorse Donald Trump. Both now convicted of a crime and having left Congress. Defense Department awards $400 million to a Trump buddy that Trump promoted. Speaking of corruption, appeals court rejects the Trump DOJ's request to resume federal executions. Bernie meets with Major League Baseball president to save 42 minor league teams around the country. That's 25% of the minor league, I guess. And lastly, this just breaking, a federal appeals court ruled that Deutsche Bank and Capital One must hand over years of President Donald Trump's financial records in compliance with House Democrats' subpoenas. This will also go to the Supreme Court. I believe this was, I'm just looking at this now for the first time, a 3-judge panel, is that right? Which means that before it goes to the Supreme Court, it'll probably go to the full, they call the en banc, the full Second Circuit Court. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Thanks for being here. You know, people noticed this yesterday, and I don't know how many people noticed it, but when I said the 5-time award-winning Majority Report, I looked behind me because I forgot, like, we got that YouTube plaque. I mean, 5 is sort of an arbitrary number. I think if we were to count up all the awards, it's probably closer to like 6 or 7 or 8, maybe even. But 5 just sounds like a rounded number, and it would screw me up. If I changed the number of, if I said 6-time award-winning Majority Report, I would probably not get through the opening. Just too much of a creature of habit. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Jamie is out today, but everybody else is here. Michael has come in. He's got his Adidas
Indeed.
Product placement.
That's right. Socially responsible company.
Are they?
No.
Oh. I was going to say. A little surprised about that. Well, it doesn't. I mean, it does happen. In fact, one of our sponsors today is a pretty socially responsible clothing manufacturer. We will get to that shortly. Tomorrow, still sort of in an internal debate mode. I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna pull the veil back, as it were, open the kimono, as they say, on the deliberative process here at the Majority Report as to how we make our editorial decisions. And we flipped a coin and decided probably that we shouldn't live stream tomorrow's impeachment hearings, only because there's going to be no fact witnesses. These are just opinions from constitutional scholars as to whether Donald Trump's obvious crimes reach the level of impeachment. And it is really, I think, just to backfill a political argument. Impeachment is a political process. And so I think probably what we'll do is we will watch them in the morning. We will present to you some of the highlights. There'll be 2 or 3 key quotes that I think will suffice. Beyond that, there's going to be a lot of grandstanding by the Republicans in the Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee is huge, too, incidentally. And you got people like Matt Gaetz on this thing. They're going to be throwing out a lot of junk tomorrow. And so you have seen today a bevy of reporting, and I would imagine, timed releases of information that debunk all of the conspiracy theories that you will hear tomorrow from the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee. First off, the Inspector General came out with a report today, or not today, but the reporting is that Bill Barr is mad about the report. We haven't seen the full thing yet. We've just seen leaks about it. But it appears to be quite clear. Let's put it this way. It would be released if it helped Donald Trump at this point. And the Inspector General investigation shows that it was perfectly appropriate what the FBI did in initiating the investigation into the Trump campaign in 2016. That's number one. Number two, all the stuff that none of us want to have to have read into about the conspiracies that Ukraine was involved in trying to influence the outcome of the election, they have been debunked. Story out today in Politico that Richard Burr of North Carolina, Republican senator, said in October 2017 that the Senate Intelligence Committee would be examining collusion by either campaign during the 2016 elections. And it turns out that this story came out today. The Senate interviewed Alexandra Chalupa, who we keep hearing. Dennis Nunes said Chalupa like 4,000 times during a hearing. She's a Democratic consultant. And she was coordinating supposedly with Ukrainians. Well, apparently what Chalupa did and she was interviewed by the Republicans on the Senate Intel Committee. And they were focusing on this one Politico article that they all cite. That was by Ken, what's his face? I can't remember his name now. Vogel. And apparently, according to a person with direct knowledge of the closed-door hearing in which they examined this article, Chalupa in that article was quoted as saying officials at the Ukrainian embassy were helpful. It's just a quote. Were were, quote, helpful to her effort to raise the alarm about Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, in 2016. That same article noted there was little evidence of a top-down effort by the Ukrainian government to sabotage Trump's campaign. Politico is trying to save their own ass here, too, incidentally. That's what's going on here. In her Senate testimony, Chalupa denied serving as an intermediary between the Ukrainian embassy and the DNC. She said she had been targeted by a Russian active measure campaign. Intelligence officials have since briefed senators on Russia's attempts to pin blame for the 2016 interference on Kyiv as part of a disinformation operation. This is according to a source familiar with the briefings. So in other words, Politico is writing a story because they know that now their one story by Ken Vogel has become the sort of centerpiece, linchpin of this completely debunked conspiracy theory. And Chalupa conducted the Manafort research and outreach to the embassy on her own. She was careful because she didn't want to, the embassy was very, very careful to deal with this because they didn't want to get involved in anything political. Angus King said that he's been to 20 to 30 briefings and hearings on the subject of election interference in 2016. I've never heard of one word about any culpability on the part of Ukraine. Today, Mitt Romney is the first Republican to say, I saw no evidence from our intelligence community nor from representatives today for the Department of State that there is any evidence of any kind that suggests that Ukraine interfered in our elections. All of this is being presented because in anticipation of what the Republicans are going to do tomorrow. Now, if you are a host of a cable news show or frankly, a YouTube news show, and you're going to invite a Republican on to talk about any of this, it sucks. But if you're going to do your job properly, read into some of this so that when John Kennedy says, Chalupa and Ukraine and conspiracy theory, you can do something other than go like, come on, what? Really? No. So kudos to Chris Cuomo, who does that exactly right here with this Republican congressman who's on, who is it again now?
Randy Weber.
Randy Weber from Texas, talking about like all the different things. Crowd strike, Chalupa strike. Here it is.
Chris, was CrowdStrike involved in the DCCC hacking?
Yes.
Or is CrowdStrike in part owned by a Ukrainian?
No.
Really?
Yes.
That's not the information. Yes, really, or yeah, that's not the information that we have. And
you
the
have
president
bad
is
information. The man is American born of Russian descent. He's not Ukrainian. And even if he were, that's what you're going to hang it on? Your head of national security, Tom Bossert, said that was a joke. You heard testimony from experts saying it's a joke. The intel community says it's not true. Mueller said it's not true. Burr said it's not true.
What Trump is saying is go back and let's look at all of the information on the DCCC server that helped fight against his campaign.
They operated in a cloud system. There is no server to steal.
No server, but they were hacked into, and the president wanted that investigated. It's one of the things that he gave to President Zelensky as an example of corruption.
It was investigated. What he went to Zelensky with was a conspiracy theory that there's some missing server when there is no physical server. CrowdStrike and the FBI both said it.
I mean, there you have it. I mean, there's good for Chris Cuomo to actually read into it. But look at the people he cited. Richard Burr, Republican chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. The former head of the Department of Homeland Security appointed by Trump said the same thing. At one point, if you're one of those people out there who keeps talking about this, you're either willfully ignoring the facts, you refuse to believe anybody, or you're just, I don't know. I don't know what you're doing. I mean, I understand what, Weber's doing. He's either an idiot or he's just trying to maintain, good graces with Donald Trump. But there's a lot of people out there who are just sort of pushing this stuff. We need to investigate the investigators. Well, it's happening. Bill Barr, one of the most corrupt attorney generals that I think we've had in a significant period of time. And I lived through this guy. Where is that?
Only God, no other king. Let the might.
But didn't he actually, not to in any way clean his image up, but didn't he
he and Comey had that, they stopped some of the worst of the spying.
They needed to intimidate him in his hospital bed.
Yes, it was Comey who was there with him actually at the time. The Bill Barr is now mad at the Inspector General of the DOJ. And now, if we have just that deep of a deep state, then roll it up anyways. Spend your time off Twitter and go enjoy yourself. I don't know. I mean, it's like that is now, it seems to me, just incredibly discrediting. And people have to justify why they're saying this stuff when there's absolutely no evidence for it. The fact that Manafort had been exposed by literally a group called, what was it? The Ukrainian Anti-Corruption Organization, which is the one that exposed this black ledger. An independent Ukrainian government agency, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. And this was, it showed that Paul Manafort had committed crimes there. That's just the bottom line of it. I mean, I believe me, it makes me nauseous to have to go through this stuff, but this is just the playing field that we play with. And, we're going to talk to Ann Nelson. Some of, what we're dealing with today and what she's talking about in this sort of network of funding on the right, it's also a function of our media, of deficiencies in our media. All right, now I just got all excited and I lost all my ad copy. Now, here we go.
Never get so excited you lose the ad. Speaking of media.
Support for today's show comes from The New Yorker. As you know, because you're smart, because you listen to this show, The New Yorker represents the best writing in America today. You can enjoy the works of Emily Nussbaum. She's the television critic for The New Yorker, who in 2016 won the Pulitzer Prize for criticism. Or Doreen St. Felix, staff writer at New Yorker, covers the highs and lows of today's culture. 2019, she won the Ellie Award for columns and commentary. Or John Cassidy covers politics and economics for The New Yorker. He's written articles on topics ranging from the intelligence failures before the Iraq War to the economics of John Maynard Keynes. For me, it's like literally the idea that The New Yorker advertises on the show gives me a huge amount of credibility in the eyes of my family, friends. It's impressive, but also it's great. It's great writing. I watched The Irishman this weekend. And
good flick.
It's a good flick, but also read Richard Brody's take on it today, watching The Irishman on Netflix. Best way to see it. This type of it's stories like that. Now, of course, there's a ton of best books of the year. Katie Wallman writes about, but there's also stories on how history will judge the Republicans defending Trump on impeachment. And I mean, just a whole, Hip Camp. I got to check that out, actually. The writing there is fantastic. Great takes on news stories. A great way to read some short fiction. And now you can just get 12 weeks for just $6, plus the New Yorker tote bag, weekly home delivery of the print edition, and an unlimited access to NewYorker.com. And they've got 10 to 15 exclusive site-only stories a day. When you go to NewYorker.com/majority, enter the code majority. You're also going to be able to access the apps, the online archive, the crossword puzzle, and more. Again, that's newyorker.com/majority. Enter the code majority, save 50% on a 12-week subscription, and get the exclusive tote. Meanwhile, we were talking about clothing manufacturers that are socially responsible. Well, would you buy a t-shirt for $50 if you knew it only cost $7 to make? I wouldn't. Everlane only makes premium essentials. Your t-shirts, your basic button-downs, the clothes you wear, the workhorses of your clothing, of your closet, essentially. They use the finest materials without traditional markups. They want you to know what you're paying for and why. So they're radically transparent about their real costs and the costs on every step of their process, from the materials they use to the ethical factories they work with, Michael. Not to mention essentials like the Cotton Crew t-shirt are exactly what they should be. They're versatile, simple, stylish, made from quality materials. Everlane's clothes look better, they cost less, they last longer. I have Everlane sneakers. I am currently wearing, as I sit here, Everlane, what do they call them? The boxers.
Briefs?
No, the boxer briefs, exactly. They're awesome. I wore the same ratty type of underwear for years and years and years. I upgraded, and honestly, I feel better every day. Every single day.
There was a whole conversation here in the office, and we're like, you know what it must be? New underwear.
Seriously. Plus, they got 100% grade A cashmere. Like I said, they got the quality cotton basics. They got sustainable silks.
I have one of those cashmere sweaters from Everlane. It's amazing.
I also have a hoodie. It's not the zipper kind, but the other kind. But it's sweet. Incredibly comfortable.
My favorite hoodie is from Everlane.
I put that thing on. I fall asleep. They have perfectly fit Oxford shirts. Right now, you can check out our personalized collection at everlane.com/majority. Plus, you'll get free shipping on your first order. That's everlane.com/majority. everlane.com/majority. And lastly, what do I sleep in besides my Everlane underwear? Well, my Brooklinen sheets. This holiday season, it's time to gift the ones you love or yourself something just a little bit cozier. Lucky for you, Brooklinen is having their biggest sale yet this Black Friday through Cyber Monday. Well, I hope it's still going on. But I got to tell you, I've got now multiple sets of Brooklinen sheets. I've got a Brooklinen comforter. I'm eyeing some Brooklinen towels. There has not been a single thing I've gotten from Brooklinen that I haven't loved. Apparently, it's the home of the internet's favorite sheets. They got over 50,000 five-star reviews and counting. And now Brooklinen, like I said, has moved beyond the bedroom to offer essentials for your bathroom, like towels, shower curtains, bath mats, and even an ultra-soft loungewear. I didn't know about that. All without the luxury markup. Do you like softness? Do you like comfort? How about essentials to help you relax? Brooklinen has it all. Brooklinen.com is having the biggest sale ever, and it's happening right now for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Brooklinen is so confident in their product that all their sheets, comforters, and towels come with a lifetime warranty. The only way to get access to the biggest event and free shipping is to go to brooklinen.com. Brooklinen.com today. Buy today. And if you're just hearing this and it's post-Black Friday and Cyber Monday, you can still use the promo code MAJORITY at brooklinen.com for 10% off and free shipping anytime. Brooklinen, everything you need to live your most comfortable life. Check it out. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Ann Nelson on the Shadow Network, Media, Money, and the Secret Hub of the Radical Right. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program a faculty and research fellow at Columbia University and author of Shadow Network, Media, Money, and the Secret Hub of the Radical Right. Ann Nelson, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sam.
So now I got to tell you, this is really, I really enjoyed this this book because in many respects, this is stuff that I used to pay a lot more attention to like 10 years ago, 15 years ago even. And it seems like it went it seemed that it submerged a bit, maybe during the Obama years and even in the lead up to the Trump election. But it has been there apparently this whole time. And you give us at the top of the book basically a dramatis personae. Maybe I'm mispronouncing that, but it is basically lays out the characters essentially in this book. But they're characters who make up this network of people that is very much at the core a sort of a religious movement. Would you say, or how would you describe it?
Well, I'd go back to one of the founders of it, Richard Viguerie, who talks about it as a three-legged stool. So you've got the socially conservative fundamentalists, religious fundamentalists, and their causes are to reverse women's reproductive rights and LGBT civil and political rights. Then you've got the economic interests, which include a lot of extractive industries, oil barons in Texas, miners in the West, whose goal is to eliminate environmental regulations and taxes and social programs. And then the third leg really involves the political strategists themselves, like Richard Viguerie and some of the other founders, who really were masterminds of political mechanics that serve to thwart the majority. It's how to energize minority voters in swing states that achieve their political agenda.
Now, I can't remember if it was Weyrich or Viguerie who was famous for saying, "We don't want people to vote because that helps us."
Well, yeah, Weyrich says we want our people to vote, and we want to basically discourage the other people from voting. And that has been a strategy that has played out very well in their favor.
Indeed. Now, I mean, will you just walk us through that sort of like, where was the impetus? Because it wasn't until the early to mid 70s, in the wake of the Roe v. Wade, that the Christians, I guess, self-identified Christians and evangelical Christians were terribly politicized, I guess. And just give us a sense of like who approached whom in this dynamic?
Right. Well, and I like to be it's impossible to be precise in this terminology, but Christians involves a huge expanse of Americans and others, many of whom would totally disagree with this project. Evangelicals include moderates and liberals and all kinds of people who are not politicized. So I'm talking about a narrow band who are mostly fundamentalists, and many of them are based in the Southwest. A lot of them subscribe to kind of 19th century Southern values like states' rights against the federal government. And in the early days, they were pushing back against school integration. And they banded together after Barry Goldwater's loss and got behind Ronald Reagan and helped him win through the Southern Strategy in 1980, hoping that he would promote their cause. In 1981, these groups came together and founded something called the Council for National Policy, which is intentionally the most boring name in the world. And then they used this network that includes media, major donors contributing millions of dollars, political strategists, and used it in a highly targeted state-by-state basis to advance their agenda over the last 40 years.
you also use the term Christian nationalist. Will you break that out for us?
Well, there is a group of people in the United States who believe that, first of all, they have a direct line to God, and that God gives them directions that they should impose on the rest of us. And that includes Christians who are not of their belief. That includes certainly every non-Christian. And beyond that, they have these two relationships to authoritative documents as they see it. They believe in what they call biblical inerrancy, which is that every word of the Bible is the literal truth. So they're against the teaching of evolution in schools. They're against a lot of things. Of course, they can't really make sense of this because the Bible decrees a lot of things that aren't realistic in modern life. You must stone an adulterer to death. Well, if we implemented that on a mass scale, there would be real trouble. But
I feel like even if we did that on a small scale, there'd be trouble.
Well, I just haven't ever seen it work. And so they also impose this idea on the U.S. Constitution, and they say that the founders of the Republic were Christians, that they believed that God and their form of religion is an essential foundation of American government. Now, many constitutional scholars really debate this, and they talk about the role of freedom of religion and freedom not to have religion as a foundation of U.S. government. And the other problem is that if you bring this kind of biblical inerrancy idea to the Constitution, you come up with things that were approved, such as slavery, such as depriving women of political rights, etc. So a lot of their followers don't really look into their arguments very closely. They tend to hear the headlines and proceed out of emotion and don't really examine the text.
I was struck by on that list of folks that you cover, and sort of like some of the players in terms of the fundamentalists. You go down that list. There are people I used to talk about quite a bit, guys like Tony Perkins and Tim LaHaye, who had the series of Left Behind series about how we're all. Well, not all. I don't know where I end up, but
I'm afraid you're left behind.
I had a feeling.
Sorry.
I'll be left behind. And also James Dobson. I mean, I used to just pour through James Dobson's parenting guides for comedy and things that were disturbing, frankly. But these guys, they're not names that you hear that often. But the other person on that page is Mike Pence. And I interviewed a biographer of Mike Pence's, I guess it was about a year ago or so from now, actually. And he told me that Mike Pence is the most powerful theocrat that has ever risen as far, this far in our government. Where does Pence fit into this network prior to becoming vice president?
Well, Mike Pence became a favorite son of the Council for National Policy as early as 2008. And they really reached out to him and cultivated him for the presidency over the years. This is laid out in Tom LoBianco's recent biography of Pence. And so Pence has made numerous appearances at the secret meetings of the Council for National Policy. And then just a few months ago, he tweeted a very public photograph of him praising the Council for National Policy. And I lay out in the book that the scenario by which the deal was cut with Donald Trump to become their favored candidate. And part of that deal was to ditch Trump's first choice for running mate, Chris Christie, and replace it with Mike Pence.
I mean, just walk us through that, because it is, I mean, there's two things that I feel like struck me about that deal was there was a lot of reporting at the time that a lot of self-identified evangelical Christians who were Trump supporters don't seem to go to church on some level. But the other thing is that Mike Pence was instrumental in his victory. I mean, walk us through that, how that happened, and then maybe we should get into who are some of the big players in the Council for National Policy.
Sure. So yeah, in my book, Shadow Network, I really kind of lay out the 40-year arc. And we come into the 2016 elections. And I should add that over this time, a lot of the professional news media in the middle of the United States is failing economically. Of newspapers going away, local radio stations that reported professional news being bought up and replaced by chains of fundamentalist radio stations. You have a rapid growth in fundamentalist television broadcasting. So you have this voters block of mostly older, white, somewhat rural Christian voters who may or may not be registered to vote, who may or may not go and vote. And so the strategists decided that if they could activate 18 million of these people in specific states, swing states, that could tip the election regardless of the popular election outcome. So they got behind their favorite candidates. Ted Cruz was of their culture. His father is a fundamentalist pastor who's extremely conservative, very much a Christian nationalist. So Ted Cruz grew up in this world. He is absolutely of it. But the problem was that Ted Cruz, in the end, did not win the primaries. I believe partly because his charisma deficit. So
that's
here
being
they were
very generous.
I try. So here they were with Donald Trump winning the primaries. And of course, the Southern Baptist leaders, many of them had been on records being never Trumpers and saying, this is not a man of God. He breaks all of our rules. And they had to deal with that. So Tony Perkins, who was then the head of the Council for National Policy, helped the other leaders convene a huge gathering on June 21st, 2016, and worked with Ralph Reed, another member of the Council for National Policy, whose name you may recall, to bring together 1,000 fundamentalist leaders from all over the country for a kind of show and tell with Donald Trump. Trump had won the primaries based on his celebrity and his flamboyance. But he didn't have campaign financing. He didn't have ground troops. He didn't have a party behind him. So he really had very poor prospects going into the general elections. The Council for National Policy affiliates had all of the above: strategists, money, ground troops. So they go into the Marriott Marquis, this big, hotel on Times Square, and into the ballroom, and they basically cut a massive deal. And they hand Trump a list of requirements. One is to make up an evangelical advisory council. And a third of these so-called religious advisors are members of the Council for National Policy. A second element is to allow the heads of CNP affiliates to give him the names of acceptable judges to nominate for the federal courts. These organizations are the National Rifle Association, the Federalist Society, and the Heritage Foundation. The third element was to have Mike Pence serve as his running mate and thereby bring in as many of his fundamentalist followers as possible. And then another element was to let them, including Tony Perkins himself, write homophobic elements of the Republican platform for the National Convention. And all of a sudden, the Republican platform comes out, and journalists are saying, this is the most reactionary platform we've seen in 80 years, and we're not quite sure why Tony Perkins should be writing social elements of it. But there it is. So it all comes out of this meeting, at which point all of the forces connected to the Council for National Policy and its affiliates and its its other organizations and its churches go to work and perform the big push for Trump leading into November.
And the rest, I guess, as they say, is history in that regard.
Well, and there's an interesting element of that history because, as we know, all of the national media said Hillary Clinton has it in the bag. She did win the popular vote by 3 million, but then Trump won the Electoral College by less than 100,000 votes spread over 3 states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Now, as it happens, the Council for National Policy and its donor circles had enacted right-to-work laws crippling the unions in Michigan and Wisconsin in the previous 8 years. They've deprived Democrats of 3 to 4% of their vote. So you have this really elegantly defined mechanism that's working in very targeted ways. And I have to say that one can only conclude that the Democratic National Party was asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's at the very least. And the thing is that back in 2004, there was it didn't seem to be as sort of targeted although to a certain extent it was, I guess, theory about bringing even more of those evangelicals out when the Bush administration was placing anti-marriage equality referendum on key states. I don't know if they were doing it or is it part of a greater network, putting these referendums on key states to drive out that vote in the 2004 election.
Yeah, there's a lot of coattail election mechanics going on here. So this organization and its affiliates, it's connected to something called the State Policy Network. It's connected to something called the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. Mm-hmm. And so they'll work on local propositions, including opposing marriage equality, in favor of gun control, and then drive out these voters, often with misleading or outright false campaign material, and inflammatory material. And then when they get them to the polls on this hot button issue for them, they'll vote down the ticket for Republicans. So this happened with gun control propositions in California. This happened with marriage equality in a number of states. And I have to say that after immersing myself in this research, I feel that very little of it involves deeply held principle. A lot of it grows out of focus groups and polling and just seeing how they can activate certain blocks of voters.
And you mentioned that the Council for National Policy funders and I guess affiliates were heavily, I guess, associated with, at the very least, I can see Wisconsin and Michigan, right? Because you're talking about, and I want to go into this because, you know, one of the things that struck me was like, how did Betsy DeVos and Richard Prince show up so intimately in Donald Trump's circles, right? And maybe all these billionaires just hang around with each other, but the DeVosses and the Kochs were DeVos obviously huge in Michigan, the Koch brothers huge in Wisconsin. Tell us about their I guess relationship with the CNP.
Well, the DeVos family goes back to goes way back in time with this group, and they have been major donors to James Dobson, whom you mentioned, and his focus on the family empire, which includes, countless books and radio stations and television appearances. It's really a media empire that would probably be invisible to most people in, eastern urban areas, but it has a lot of clout. And Dobson founded the Family Research Council, which Tony Perkins became head of. So Betsy DeVos's family, the Princes, and her brother Eric Prince, who was of Blackwater fame and is now active with the Trump administration on military matters, the Prince family was very active as donors, and so was the family that she married into, which was the Richard DeVos family. And we're talking about a family that's sitting on $5 to $6 billion from their Amway Corporation, which is multi-level marketing that has run into various regulatory problems over the years, shall we say. So Betsy DeVos has really made a career out of opposing funding for public education, opposing support for public school teachers. And when she's nominated to be Secretary of Education, a lot of educators were just flabbergasted. I mean, she was negatively qualified to work on public education. And the movement got behind her. Mike Pence cast the deciding vote for her nomination. She's proceeded to be an adversary to public education since. And she is not herself, to my knowledge, a member of the Council for National Policy, but her mother, her father, her father-in-law, her brother, and her husband have been. So I call her the crown princess of the movement.
And we should say, I'm paraphrasing, but there was an interview that she gave with her husband. She was talking about, we don't have an issue with public education. We just have an issue with public schools. And the idea being, we want this pot of money that goes towards the, public education in quotes, and we want to basically be able to give it to parochial schools.
And to homeschooling.
Yep. All right.
So her real, and this is part of the vision of the movement. Because if you go to a public school, you're going to be exposed to different populations, ethnicities, you're going to be exposed to different ideas. And within this movement's religious schools and homeschooling, kids could go through high school never being exposed to the concept of evolution, right? They could go through high school with never being exposed to sex education because they don't believe in that either. So it's a matter of a broader system of controlling the information that people get. They're against mainstream media, news media. They are against public universities. So there are just so many counts on which they wish to protect people from the influence of education and information.
I want to touch on both those. Let's start though with campuses, because to the extent that they can influence people who stay within the bubble, it seems to me they're also attempting with less success to influence people who are outside that bubble. You bring up Charlie Kirk in the book. And the timing is pretty good in terms of this nexus. He just launched an initiative with Jerry Falwell at Liberty University called the Falkirk. What is it? It's the Falkirk Center for, I don't know, revanchist ideas. I'm not sure exactly what the actual title is. What is it? It's yes, the Falkirk Center for Faith and Liberty. Just give us a sense of where Charlie Kirk falls in this. I've had some conversations with him about who funds him, and he was a little bit cagey about it. I'm curious as to how close he is to this network.
Well, I have learned since the book was published a couple of months ago that he has become a member of the Council for National Policy. Oh. And he is being presented as the leader of the youth wing. So he has not disclosed where his funding comes from. He has been on record that he's received some funding from this donor network. And they promote him heavily. His speeches are promoted on some of their digital media. And he's really trying to organize this younger generation because a lot of members of this movement are aging out. And it's not clear where future leadership will come from. A lot of the donors are aging out. But on the other hand, they've got a problem because demographically time is not on their side. Americans are more accepting of marriage equality. and public opinion is fine with it. Americans are in favor of certain measures of gun control, and they also are accepting of many forms of abortion, especially in the first trimester. So their absolutist measures get less and less support from public opinion, which means that they have to find ways to circumvent public opinion and majority rule in order to implement them.
It's fascinating because that you make that point. We've been watching for the past couple of weeks as Charlie Kirk has tried to make Turning Points USA seem more gay friendly, frankly, and a little bit more, I think, modern. And they have been now attacked from their right for doing so. For the and I think there's a fairly good argument about the hypocrisy there and the disingenuousness of it as well. But be that as it may, you sort of touched on this, but I want to dive a little deeper in this before we finish. The concept of this creation of an alternate media. And the idea of how, there's a quality to this. Maybe this is, maybe you're not comfortable with this analogy, but, with Dianetics, like where there's out in Hollywood, where there is a sort of like a semi-secret society that basically helps each other's members and sort of lifts people up and, helps to promote people, that does not exist. It seems to me to exist on the right. It does not exist on the left. You write about Salem Media. I happen to have done AM Talk Radio for years and would watch how the Salem radio hosts would also get paid by other entities. And there was just a whole sort of almost like web, if you will, network, I guess, of support that would come seemingly from like different directions. But I get the sense that it was really all emanating out of sort of a couple of people. They were just sending it out into like 5 or 10 different directions, and it would come back at people who are on the other end of the receiving of that largesse. Will you talk about the sort of the separate media world that they created? Because it's almost analogous to it seems to me it's happened writ large now that, Fox and AM Talk Radio have managed to create that as well. But it seems to have started really with when you get down to the sort of the more pure stuff, it was like Christian broadcasting.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear you say that, Sam, because I grew up in Oklahoma and I go back to see family a lot. And I've lived in New York City for the last, few decades. And, when I came across these radio stations in the Midwest, I came back to New York and nobody had heard of Salem Media. And, they were recently called the 5th largest radio broadcaster in the country. They've got any number of internet digital platforms. They've got a book publishing company. They are a media powerhouse. And the thing is that since this fairness doctrine was defeated by Reagan in 1987, these broadcasters have no responsibility to offer professional news reporting or to present two sides of any issue. So what you get is this unidirectional messaging by these hosts who are basically telling people what to think, telling them one side of a story, often falsified, and also, as you say, part of this economic network where Council for National Policy organizations such as the Leadership Institute will advertise on Tony Perkins' show from the Family Research Council, and the revenues will just flow round and round. Yep. And you go back to some of the major donors, the Princes, the DeVosses, Foster Friess, the Templeton Foundation, etc. The Koch brothers came into it late in 2010, from what I can tell, but they're not as much part of this donor system. But you have what professional news reporting having its economic crisis, which winnows out a lot of quality news organizations, these broadcasters rush to fill the vacuum with utterly one-sided cases. And people are actually told by these radio hosts that it's their Christian obligation to vote a certain way and to run for office and represent this movement. So you're talking about states where people spend a lot of time in their cars. And my friends in New York say, oh, they're all listening to podcasts. No, the older people turn on the radio, and a lot of the younger ones do too. And you are bombarded with this messaging from town to town across the Plain States.
Well, I mean, I guess lastly, is there a solution to this? Or let me rephrase that. What should the response by those of us who may not just simply have that level of awareness that, wow, I could live my entire life in a lot of these states and literally hear no dissent? I mean, I just keep thinking about, there was a clip of a woman who went to a Justin Amash town hall and in Michigan, and he was there to explain why he was for impeachment, based upon the Mueller report. And there was a woman who was there who was just absolutely shocked. She thought the Mueller report exonerated Trump. Mm-hmm. And she was just shocked to hear Justin Amash, who she also apparently had some affinity for, tell her that, no, that's not what it says at all. I mean, that's pretty amazing that there could be such a concerted and cohesive and comprehensible effort to create a completely different narrative amongst tens of millions of people.
Yeah. And again, part of that is because people who owned a lot of our professional news media got greedy a few decades ago and allowed local news coverage to wither, starved local newspapers and local radio stations of resources. And that's a big issue in this question. 2 years ago, I just dropped everything to write Shadow Network because I felt that we were in a period of political crisis, which I still believe. And it's heavily documented. I think people who read it will get ideas about how they would like to respond. I would say, first of all, rebuild the national conversation. Don't vilify each other. Listen and explain and try to understand what kind of sourcing will connect people and rebuild a sense of trust. And that means a really strong focus on people in what is dismissively called the flyover. I mean, I'm sorry, that's disrespectful. There are incredible people working in these states. They've been barraged with this misinformation. There has to be a national conversation on a new level. But I would say that once, if we get past November 2020, there has to be a serious effort to rebuild a national news media system where you don't just have elite news institutions on the coast broadcasting their points of view to the rest of the country. It has to be woven together and mutually respectful, and representing really different regional and cultural points of view. And that's a longer effort, but I don't think democracy can survive without it.
Ann Nelson, the book is Shadow Network, Media, Money, and the Secret Hub of the Radical Right. Thanks so much for your time today. We'll put a link to that book at majority.fm. Thanks again.
Thank you, Sam.
All right, folks. Going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you get extra content every day. You get the free show, free of commercials. And you support everything that we do here. and our attempts, it's butterfly wings. But George Soros, if you're listening, if you're willing to just drop off a bag of cash, we will expand. We will try and reach those folks. I mean, I do have a dream that I doubt will ever be realized of buying up some of those or renting some of those sticks, as we used to call it in the radio business. Those unused sticks in states like Wisconsin and Michigan, Pennsylvania. Low power and broadcasting podcasts on radio. But that's not going to happen. I mean, I'm not going to discourage anybody who's listening to the program for funding for something like that. But in the meantime, we're trying to expand what we offer here, and who knows? Who knows? Hope springs eternal. But you can become a member by going to jointhemajority.report.com. Also, don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Usually you use the coupon code majority, you get 10% off. Right now, I think they're having a big pre-Christmas sale, 30% off. Go check it out. Go buy the Majority Report blend. Try that out. 30% off. All of these coffees are incredibly inexpensive for high-quality coffee. Free shipping. And don't forget, you can sign up for the AM Quickie at amquickie.com. That's completely free. And it's 5 minutes every day with the headlines you need to know to start your day. So amquickie.com. You can find all of that on the app, majorityapp.com. Michael, today is Tuesday, and that means the Michael Brooks Show day.
Yes, indeed. Tonight is jam-packed. We are going to be talking about AMLO's record in Mexico. Then Big Wosny Lambre from The Athletic and Count the Dings joins us to talk about the NBA ratings dip and the state of the primary and why Rudy Giuliani and Michael Bloomberg, you could use their two biographies to tell us everything wrong with the state of the world. And then we're going to play our conversation with Slavoj Žižek that has been behind a paywall, a bunch of other things. And in the post game, we are going to have a labor union organizer, one of the organizers of the protests and strikes happening right now in Colombia, is going to be calling us directly from Colombia to basically tell us what the hell is going on. So hell of a lot to get to. Patreon.com/TMBS, Michael Brooks Show on YouTube.
Jamie's out, but you can check out the Intifada at patreon.com/the Intifada. Matt.
Yeah, most recently on Literary Hangover, I did Arthur Miller's The Crucible with Alex and Grace, and we talked about the McCarthyite context of that. So Arthur Miller and Marilyn Monroe versus the House Un-American Activities Committee. So check that out, folks. 2 hours and 42 minutes, so it's a big, long one.
Whoa.
Is this true that Kamala's out?
Oh, is that right?
I'm seeing some hints that
there's definitely blood in the water.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a sort of throw everybody under the bus piece in
when you get to that phase in the campaign when everybody's writing
one of her staffers,
the real problem was everybody else.
One of her staffers, I think, left for Bloomberg's campaign.
Ooh, that's cold. Only Clinton people could do that. Sorry, you needed to get all of our dregs, Kamala.
Well, I mean, he's hiring.
Available.
Again, I think it really is the first time in history that we've seen anybody literally buy an option to run as an independent in the general election. That's basically it. That is what he's done. He has bought an option to do so.
I was correct on, I undersold Beto, but man, was I wrong about Harris. I thought she would be very formidable in that center lane, but nope.
I mean, I think part of the problem was she just couldn't figure out where she wanted to. She had no sort of the one brand I think that would have been obvious for her. They got overly sensitive to early on. I mean, this is where I think part of the story of this campaign I think is going to be one way or another how overly influential Twitter has been in this campaign. And by that, I mean, I think the Harris people got the heebie-jeebies because they saw on Twitter the stuff about her being a prosecutor. I think it was
frankly, in this case, this would be a positive example of people using that to highlight
good job.
horrifying record.
Yeah. No, but I think that, the fact is that
it needn't have been such a liability.
Well, there was also that New York Times piece that, just on the traditional tip, there was a New York Times piece that came out, I think like in the first week. And I remember you telling me specifically, you were like, this piece is getting shared by people I know who would have been really open to her. And that really cracked some ice too.
Yes, I think so. But I think the groundwork was laid for that on Twitter, which, has a lot of its consumers on the political sort of like thread is the consumers are journalists. And I also think, frankly, I think Warren coming out with her financing plan and with her sort of two-step Medicare for all, I think that was also a function of overreacting to Twitter on some level. I mean, I just don't think the broader Democratic electorate was demanding this finance stuff. And I think, one of the things that it used to be, all these campaigns would be just terrified of the Beltway media, because that was the only narrative that would exist. And so David Broder and Tim Russert would drive the narrative by because they had the playing field to themselves. And I think in the same way that narrative was not represented, but overreacted to, I think it's also on some level, these campaigns can overreact to Twitter, particularly when there's some measure of defensiveness that already is there, right? Like, people can mock me for wearing sweatsuits, but it's not going to have the same resonance as it would for other people because I don't wear sweatsuits. Oh, yeah. Right. And so, anyway.
Ironically, in both cases, none.
What's that?
I said in both cases, the effect would actually be none.
Right.
I mean,
well,
I'm
maybe.
I'm not releasing a post sweatsuits plan.
Well, all right, we'll see.
I'm the Bernie of this.
We'll see. That's possible. You could be all in on the sweatsuit, and that is the point. I think that is one of the advantages that Bernie has, is that he just doesn't have any other positions, and so he's not going to get defensive.
Well, and I also thought, and that's also why his tweet that was one of the most effective messaging. He said something. He said, "I'll say something new when we solve the problems I've talked about for 40 years."
Yep.
That's good.
You want no good.
Well, I also think that besides Twitter, I think what influenced Warren is the constituency she was picking up and the type of people
with
that
her
were
branding, because she went so hard on all that wonk branding.
Yeah,
and that hurt her, right?
I wonder if there was like skeptics of.
Well, yeah, but where are those people?
Well,
they're not out. They're not your act. Your.
Well,
they could be the people that come to her
They're,
events, basically.
But Twitter, political media.
I think Twitter. I mean, political media, but. Political media. I don't think it's that different. I mean, that's exactly right. That's my point, is that I think that she could have maintained that branding even with Twitter people saying like, you haven't come up with a finance plan. And but instead I think they overreacted to it.
Yeah, and just yesterday Bloomberg overtook her in the polls, so I guess that put her at 2%.
Harris.
Yeah.
Harris, yes. Well, Harris had no. I mean, yeah, I think that was it. That was Johnny Ballgame. And again, I think Harris is just Bloomberg just purchasing an option to run in the general.
You would be the first African American woman president. I would be the first miniature Jewish president, but we both love stopping and frisking young men of color.
There you go.
Pass the baton.
There you go.
And hand in the soda.
It gives her a pole position on VP pick. We came together from totally different backgrounds, but we came together on our desire to over-police black people.
She, the daughter of a Marxist economist. Me, a computer terminal creator.
Just thinking
Both
about
laughing at the slogan, education, not incarceration. It tickles both of us.
it's the worst new Marvel Cinematic Universe show.
Yeah, exactly. All right, folks, see you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1 half. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy!
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
I was just going to say, James Dobson would recommend that you take your son in the shower with you if you were a father, so that he could see that you had a larger symbol of manhood, that your penis was bigger. And as a way of showing dominance. And I did a video. There was a...
You look.
Before Huffington Post started a comedy, I did a James Dobson, like, raising Mila situation. Did not involve the shower. In lieu of the shower, I played basketball with her. And she was 4. And I just kept dunking and facing her. And just to show the dominance. It did not work, I will say, in terms of, like,
yeah, it's
getting respect from the family. But I also used to call focus on the family with some of those prank phone calls. We should dig those up maybe for Christmas. Will you make that as a note? Play some of those. Go way, way back. Open up the deep archives for folks. Let's take a phone call, shall we? Calling from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I believe this is me, Stephen Lira.
Stephen, you don't have to give us your last name, buddy. Where are you calling from?
Oh, well, I mean, that was probably not a good idea, but anyways, I'm calling in. I'm a long-time listener. I haven't called in a while, though.
Okay, well, and what is on your mind now?
Well, I watched a video of you recently. You were talking about Ukraine and I guess the Joe Kennedy thing, and that was really funny. But you made a comment where you said like a Politico story and a Hill story were falling apart.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I don't know if it was this. I just want to make sure. I assume you were talking about like the Clinton campaign working with Ukrainian officials to gather dirt on Trump.
Chalupa.
And
Chalupa.
well, my understanding, I mean, I'm just going to go through, I actually wrote this question out.
Okay.
But my understanding is that it was like perfectly like legal to do that. And so the biggest problem people focus on with Russia is that there was a hack, and that's illegal. So, in this area where I think there's a lot of people on the left, and I don't want to name names, but there's different takes. So I just want to know how you would draw distinctions between these kind of two things people are talking about in regard to Ukraine and Russia.
I would say this, that one, you're right. A, the legality. Two, that in the Russian case, in terms of the totality of the evidence that we have, that we've been presented, now we can disbelieve all of it. We can disbelieve all the intelligence agencies and whatnot. I'm obviously skeptical of them, but one would imagine that we would have heard some pushback on that from somewhere. This was a top-down, that it was a top-down project in terms of the interference. Then I don't know if you listened to the beginning of the show today, but I went through this. The Senate Intelligence Committee interviewed Chalupa, this woman who worked with the Democrats, never went to Ukraine, simply called the Ukrainian embassy to find out more information on the Black Ledger, which was introduced by a member of parliament from a Ukrainian anti-corruption quasi-governmental agency. And she just got that information. It was public information. And so this was not a top-down attempt to influence the election. It was just that, I've heard that this guy was accused of criminal activity in this country, and he happens to be the campaign manager for the Trump campaign. I'm going to call and investigate this guy. And so there was no sort of like policy by the Ukrainian government to interfere in the election in any way.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter, Sam, because there's a quid pro quo of Joe Biden trying to get rid of the prosecutor. So obviously, you're
being facetious.
Obviously, yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, there's an entire Republican Party, right? A, I was hoping that you would be real about that. But B, there's also an entire Republican Party that that actually would say that without even the slightest bit of sarcasm. But I appreciate the call. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
This is an important point that Mehdi Hassan makes on CNN. And it's demonstrably true. It's hard to know how this happens. I think part of it is just a function of people who get on these networks. I'm not as familiar with what goes on CNN, to be honest with you. I don't watch it that often. I don't watch MSNBC that often, to be honest, either. I'm just personally aware the vast majority that have been hired at MSNBC over the past couple of years have been former Republicans or former prosecutors.
Or intelligence.
Or
operatives.
former intelligence operatives.
It's a retirement community for Republicans who find Trump distasteful, CIA operatives, and federal prosecutors.
I mean, and this is not, you know, I'm not telling tales out of school. This is, you know, you can just watch the TV. You can see the reporting from a couple of years ago that there was a conscious effort by the new, you know, program people at MSNBC to make the network more center right. And they were basically, their plans were waylaid by Donald Trump in many respects. And so, you know, the primetime lineup remains intact. But the fact is that there's just not that many people, for Bernie in particular, who are brought on, who are, and look, you have a lot of hosts, you have a lot of contributors who come on. They don't come on as surrogates for any campaigns, but they have their preferences. I am one of them. My preference is Bernie. And when I get to those offices and I go into the green room and I go up to the studio, I meet no one else who has such a preference. And I am basically like, I don't believe there is anyone lower on the sort of like the list, if there's a list of people who are like utilized or considered at that place than me. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Well, that kind of fits
but my point,
in a way.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's like, hey, it's the Bernie guy. Put him through the service.
I don't know if that's the case, to be honest with you. But I don't know that that's the case, but I just know that's the way it just sort of like works out.
Oh, if you backed Harris, they'd put you back prime time, dude.
Welcome back to the Sam Hour.
Exactly.
Kamala Harris is my guest again. She's so smart.
Here's
her sister. She's also on the network. No problem there.
Mehdi Hassan on CNN making this point.
We often have Democrats on the panel, but not necessarily progressives, people in the Warren Sanders camp of things. So let me ask you, where do you see those candidacies right now? Because it looks like Elizabeth Warren has slid a little bit in the polls.
She has slid a bit, but I'm not sure how long that slide will continue. I think Bernie Sanders is the story that's not talked about enough. Nevada, New Hampshire, he's led in New Hampshire, the recent, I can't remember so many polls, Quinnipiac, he's leading in New Hampshire. Iowa, he's in the top 3. I mean, I saw Axios story saying that a different candidate could win each of the first 4 states. Right, yeah. You know what? Bernie could also win 3 of the first 4 states. It could happen. There's no reason not to. And I think that's what's interesting. We in the media are very obsessed with the athlete Pete Buttigieg, who was very impressive earlier this year, less so now, I think. And obviously Joe Biden being the front runner for a long time. But it would be madness to write off Warren and Sanders, especially if at some stage you would assume one of them gets out of the race at some stage. So, and then, you know, does the other person pick up all those votes?
No one said is.
I don't even know what that guy was about to say. Yeah, Whitaker. God knows what Whitaker say, but that's the reality. That is the reality. And at least Jake Tapper acknowledged the fact that, like, yeah, we have Democrats on, but not really progressive Democrats. And this is, you know, I don't know how much of a problem it has. I mean, it creates, but again, you see campaigns reacting to what happens on Twitter. And the relationship between cable news and Twitter is pretty tight. And so these things impact each other. And it forces different decisions by campaigns. And it creates different narratives that, you know, if the direct narrative doesn't necessarily make it to the general public, the meta narrative does. And that's what I was saying, like with Warren, that I think, like, I don't think that to the extent that there was drop off because around the time of her Medicare for all issues was because that she had a 2-stage legislative process for it. But I think that the meta narrative hit people saying like, she's shaky on this. She's not, it's not even that she's not fully supportive of it. I don't know that people really even are that invested in the top line of this as much as when you indicate that you're backing off something or that there's controversy around what you do with something. I think it just particularly this year, because people are looking for somebody who's just going to go in and beat Trump, that it just signals like some type of problem.
She also has, and I made this point before, that like she would be somebody who I think what's unfair is I think that her political skill set is very appropriate for a time when it would be prohibitive because of her race and gender, frankly, like in the 1990s, to be a Democratic nominee. Whereas today, I think she could definitely win the nomination, but her political skill set doesn't. I mean, I'm just thinking even on a technological level, like when she does those sort of flip-flops, now everything is just documented in real time. I could very easily see several years ago it being reported on television and then, paper reporters following her and even giving her credit, like, oh, that was good, the way she kind of dodged out of this position, versus like people just seeing in real time her. I mean, not only
I don't know what
contradicting
flip-flops.
herself. Well, no, here's a better example. Flip-flop is actually not necessarily the right word. Well, there was on healthcare. She definitely reversed herself on healthcare. But I watched.
How so?
Well, she was a co-sponsor of Bernie's bill and said she wanted to phase out private insurance.
And does her bill not? Hers doesn't do that. Hers does it in two different pieces of legislation.
Her does not do that.
In two pieces of legislation, it doesn't.
You know what? I'm sorry. I'm confused. I thought we were talking about Harris.
Oh no, we were talking about Warren.
I'm sorry. It's totally.
Oh no, yeah, I know.
Back to Harris.
Harris's problem
No. I was
that
about
she
Harris.
never got any.
I wanted to make a point about Harris, not Warren.
Okay.
Sorry. My point, and I think that the other big problem that Harris had just in this post-war was like I saw on several occasions when she would get confronted with a tough question, like they asked her when Bernie said felons should vote. Buttigieg said no. Booker said no in pretty demagogic ways. Harris said, I think we should have a serious conversation about that.
It started with the Biden thing where she criticized his position on busing and then basically came out with wow, here is put this up. Here is Chris Cillizza and Harry Enton's definitive 2020 power candidate, Democratic candidate power rankings from 51 weeks ago. Number 1, Kamala Harris. Number 2, Beto O'Rourke. Number 3, Joe Biden. Number 4, Cory Booker. Well, you got 1 out of 3. 1 out of 4. Not bad.
Definitive.
There you go.
Jesus.
It's too bad they didn't say definitive 2018 power rankings, because that would have been better. Salty Gates. Sam, is it possible Kampala is dropping out to join Bloomberg as VP? Well, I don't. You don't drop out to join Bloomberg as VP at this point. No,
because you might want to be Buttigieg.
No, it doesn't. You drop out because you've run out of money. If you want to be VP.
I would make an overture to Biden.
You stay in the race. But here's the thing. Bloomberg is only going to run as a third party, will only be in the general election as a third party candidate. And I don't even think that's a guarantee. I think he's going to look and see who the Democratic nominee is. And he's going to look at the polling and he's going to see, like, what are the chances that I could actually midwife a Donald Trump victory.
The other story that's floating around is that Steyer wants to use this to go after her Senate seat. And so she doesn't want to be, You know, I mean, it's a very bad look to not only be nationally humiliated, but she was. I mean,
She doesn't
she's
want
not
to
only
lose
gonna
in California.
She might end not in the top 3 in
Right,
California.
exactly.
So she needs
That's
to
what
get
I mean
out
by
of there.
lose in
Yeah, yeah,
California.
yeah.
And she doesn't want to go there because that all of a sudden says she's weak, and then Tom Steyer becomes California senator.
And he really could.
He should run against
in a
Dianne
statewide
Feinstein
race,
if he wants.
Talking about.
Well, I would rather anybody else, but
yeah, I mean, literally anybody else.
But he's probably.
Let's get Jank to run against Dianne Feinstein
Well,
after 2 years.
One at a time, right? Exactly. Here's Pete Buttigieg, who took a lot of heat, justifiably, for promoting a right-wing frame and a really disingenuous one about free college. And remember, it's a free college option. It's not every college is not free. It is every state has one free college option for people, which of course would reduce ultimately, I think, the cost of private colleges just by the fact that private colleges would have more competition.
I think we need to be so clear about that because I'm not trying to do whatever here, but we had a guest on this show once who was an extremely prestigious guest in another field, but she straight up said to you, Bernie's plan would never work because we can't just pay for everybody to go to Harvard for free.
Right. And I made it clear. I was like, that's not what the plan is.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not the plan. Yeah. I mean, that's why I reiterate that every time. But so you have a free college option, and it would reduce, I believe, it would create downward pressure on the tuitions across the board on all private universities. But that's not necessarily, a widely talked about selling point. But I think it is one, frankly. And so Buttigieg came out and said we don't want to pay for millionaires. And then he went on to define millionaires as people who had a combined income of more than $100,000 in terms of selling their, sending their kids to college. And I want to be clear here. If you find a state university anywhere in the country that charges less than $10,000 for in-state tuition even, you've got a massive deal relative to what it costs across the board now to send someone to college. I mean, the prices have risen exponentially over the past 20, 25 years. So Pete has to back off this, and Pete is nothing if not adept at reversing his position and changing his talking point from one that was reactionary to now it's populist. Here we go.
I just think rich people ought to be able to pay their own tuition. I have nothing against them. I just think that if you're in a position to pay full freight, then you should. And I'm also concerned about...
Pause it. Now, wait a second. Before he makes his pivot here, I just want to reiterate this. I know I get it's bored. There is a way to make sure them pay their full freight. Raise their taxes.
You should. And I'm also concerned about a narrative emerging that ignores the fact that not everybody goes to college. This is not the same thing as K through 12. This is not the same thing as Social Security, because college is not for everybody. Now, I want everybody who wants to go to college to have the chance. I want to make sure cost is never a barrier. But where I come from, 3 out of 4 people don't have a college degree. And if the message we're sending to them is that you need a college degree in order to get by in life, in order to prosper, in order to succeed, we're leaving most Americans out. And I think they're just missing that very important fact. I very much agree with the part about raising funds from the wealthy, just not in agreement about spending it on the wealthy in the case of college tuition when they can very well pay their own way, and I think they should.
The message to people who don't go to college is, guess what? That is now an affordable option for you if you want.
Mix with the plebs.
And if he wants to come out and promote a program to provide free vocational training for people, I'm down with that as well. We can certainly fund training for the trades, without a doubt. Let's subsidize when people do apprentices. Some of the electrician apprentices are really onerous in some states. You got to do this for 3 or 4 years sometimes before you get a full electrician's license. Let's subsidize it. That's not what he's going to propose. That's not happening.
I know, all of the jokes have been writing themselves, but just to reiterate, those damn rich people, they can walk into libraries, they can drive on highways, and we all know how they clog up the libraries. Free public Wi-Fi, just constantly used by rich people to buy houses in Sardinia.
That's why all the rich people are lining up behind Bernie now, because they want to stop Buttigieg's education.
Yeah, I'm trying to get free college. Not to mention the massive, if there was 0.1% of these people who sent their kid to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst for free, and they hung out with normal kids.
Yeah.
The enormous ancillary benefits of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't want to sequester rich people in their own ivory towers. Michael Bennet weighed in. He's still in the race, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
He's still in the Democratic primary race. Why not?
Living off the land.
Exactly. Living off the land.
Bullock is out, though, I guess.
Bullock is out, yes. We talked about that yesterday.
Bullock
Sestak
would
out.
be a more compelling case than this guy.
Yep. But Michael Bennet gets up in front of, and he does something that's sort of ironic. Now, I tend to agree with him. I don't think it's an either-or situation. I do think pre-K should be universal, without a doubt. We have it in New York City. One of the things that's fascinating about the fact that we had it in New York City is that the critique that we hear Pete Buttigieg talk about when we say there's a free college option in every state was very similar to one of the critiques we heard about universal pre-K before it was rolled out in New York City, which is one that it would be really difficult to implement. And it turned out that it was done shockingly quickly and well. And two, that it's not right to offer this to people who could pay universal pre-K. Now, we also do this now in New York City with free lunches. Even people who can afford to pay for lunch get it free so as not to stigmatize anybody who's paying, who's getting it for free. Universality, though, for UPK is why it's going to have staying power, even though Cuomo didn't want to dedicate long-term funding to it. It's going to stay because people like it. Here is Bennett sort of dodging the college question. I don't even know why. Why do you have to even say something else like education? Well, I think what's also more important is to feed everybody.
Climate change is the common one you see.
Right.
Now.
We're living in a country today where, unfortunately, our education system should be enforcing the income inequality we have rather than liberating kids from it. And if you did a focus group of people today and asked them what do Democrats stand for when it comes to education, what you would hear from people is free college. And as the only school superintendent ever run for president, I'm a lot more interested in free preschool than I am in free college. I'm a lot more.
The idea, again, this is the fascinating thing about the way that guys like Bennett and Buttigieg run is rather than actually promoting a policy, all they are doing is setting it against other priorities that they have not endorsed. If someone go to Michael Bennett's website right now and see how prominent the proposal for universal pre-K is. I am willing to bet it is not on that website. Yet he will use it as a club against other proposals. Is it there? Put it up. Let's see. Maybe I'm wrong.
Concern troll.
Oh, it's give money. There he is. Spent my career, continued to cite, and you got to go. Let's see. Meet Michael. Vision. Plans. Let's see. Housing. Climate change. Let's see. Keep going. Reward hard work, election security, create climate change, political reform, healthcare, education. Go to education. And let's see. Oh, maybe he does actually have it. Let's see. Keep going down. Scroll down. It's hard to get past his... It could be preschool. Keep going. Goals, let's see, achievable. Keep going.
Create 500 regional opportunity compacts.
Oh, yeah, the opportunity contacts. Okay. 2028 commitment, ensuring that all students arrive at kindergarten ready to learn. But what? What happened to preschool? Universal preschool. That's weird.
I like that
wait,
idea,
here we
but
go.
I like college
0 to
better.
5. Wait, here we go. Expand home visiting. Keep going down. Support child nutrition. Expand exposure to vocabulary.
Establish universal preschool.
Oh,
He's
there we
got it.
go. All right, there it is.
By 2027.
Well, all right. For all 4-year-olds by 2024. Okay, that's good.
You know what? This is a comms failure. This is a huge because Michael Bennett is literally like a void, and if he repeated this at every single debate, he'd at least be the universal pre-K guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Failure.
I get the sense that maybe he's not that excited about it.
Why don't we do that? It would be great if Bernie was like that. Bernie was just like, well, I mean, yeah, you could, but college is better.
We have to educate
Use the same
teenagers more.
stupid concern troll logic. You're a kid, play with Play-Doh, who
Yeah.
cares? But now you're about to be in the workforce, so I'm all worried.
Let's see. Where do we have? I wanted to play some Uber Alles. I can't seem to find it on here. Let's go to this clip now. Seb Gorka. Still doing his radio show. Dr. Gorka to you. On Salem Radio. That is the part of that Christian nationalist network. What's that book he's got there? America's Soul. There we go. And then he's got the Star Wars, that whole Star Wars thing on the right. They really love to be like, I'm cool. I'm actually into this Star Wars thing.
Baby Yoda is everything.
Look at my C-3PO statue, one of my favorites. Here he is. He's got Charlie Kirk on. Also, I mean, this is a perfect example of what our guest today was talking about. Shadow Network, the way that they basically cup each other, if you will. And you have Charlie Kirk, who has just become a member of that, what was it, the National...
Center for National Policy, I think.
Yeah, that is the sort of the Christian network. And
Council, maybe.
Council. And Council. And they just, became a member of that a year ago. And now we're seeing the sort of like the way that they cup each other. Gets on Salem to promote his new initiative with Liberty University called the Falkirk or Falkirk Center. Here he is, Seb Gorka, asking him if he, sort of nicely, are you of the Aryan heritage? Because you seem to be so, not quite.
He is founder and president of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk. Charlie, welcome to America First.
Glad to be here, Dr. Gorka. Thank you.
I just need to know one thing. Have you done that genetic testing that looks at your gene code? Because I need to know, are you also of German-Irish descent like the president?
Well, that's very funny. I am more Scots-Irish, less German-Irish, but I appreciate you mentioning it.
Because there's no other way to explain how you have a similar energy level to my old boss, because it's not enough that you have, I don't know how many chapters you have of Turning Point USA. You have these mega meetings. You're going to have one in Mar-a-Lago at the end of the month. But now you've started a center at Liberty University. Is that correct, Charlie?
That's correct, with the great Jerry Falwell Jr. at Liberty University. And the purpose of the center, called the Falkirk Center for Faith and Liberty, is to reclaim the culture, especially in Christian world, because we have seen a trend, especially amongst young Christians.
You're breaking up a bit, Charlie. Maybe hold the phone in a different position. So you're talking about the Falkirk
Take the phone
Center
out of your ass.
at Liberty University. Tell us a little bit more about the mission.
Can you hear? I hope you can hear me better now.
Yeah, carry on.
Great. But the its theme and objective is to try to educate, in particular, about.
We're losing you again, Charlie. I don't know what we're going to do because we didn't even hear who you're targeting this organization at. So let's try it one more time and then we'll call you back. So Falkirk Center, Liberty University. What's the mission?
Go.
Try it one more time. I hope you can hear me better.
Yeah, I know you're always on the road. You're always traveling, so it's hard to get you when you're not moving. Tell us.
Well, folks, there it is.
Can't we all relate
Proof
to that, though?
God exists.
Who has not done internet radio that does not sympathize with that predicament?
Now, he's not on internet radio. He's on
radio. Well, who has not done a live interview that does not sympathize?
Yeah,
of course. I sympathize with that.
When you accidentally waste the first minute of good airtime on eugenics stuff.
Right, exactly. It's just like, hey, you got to come from some great genetic stock because you got so much energy, don't you, buddy?
You got my calipers in the mail, didn't you, Charlie?
Your sperm is from a bull, from the one true race. Am I right, Charlie? Anyways, what's up with you and Jerry Falwell Jr.? Gay outreach? Oh, wait, my bad.
Yeah, so you're the new cabana boy at the Falkirk Center. Is that right, Charlie?
Just don't get into the pool.
Tell me something, Charlie. Tell us a little bit about where you get your Speedos.
Charlie, your jeans go one way, but I heard the Falwells go both ways. Oh, he's cracking up again. Are you there? Are you there?
Foster Freeze didn't roll like the Falwells, did he, Charlie?
Ladies and gentlemen.
Did Foster Freeze unlock his legs, Charlie?
Ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing sadder than the end of a witch hunt. And the witch hunt that has pursued Duncan Hunter, which started back in August of this year, actually. I think it was, maybe over the summer. Duncan Hunter being totally witch hunted. Because supposedly campaign funds were used to party and to pay off some folks. Total witch hunt. In fact, here is Duncan Hunter, Republican congressman from California, on Fox News back in August, telling everybody who the real culprit is.
Also said yesterday that your wife handled a lot of the family expenses and the campaign finances. So are you saying that it's more her fault than your fault?
Well, I'm saying when I went to Iraq in 2003, the first time I gave her power of attorney, and she handled my finances throughout my entire military career, and that continued on when I got into Congress because I'm gone 5 days a week, I'm home for 2. So and she was also the campaign manager. So whatever she did on that'll be looked at too, I'm sure. But I didn't do it. I didn't spend any money illegally. I did not use campaign money, especially for Wounded Warrior stuff. There's no way.
Yeah, no way I would have done that. Absolutely no way. Forget about it, man. Witch hunt. Witch hunt. And
my wife was so corrupt. I'm sure you could see why I used the other money for hookers.
Yeah.
Because she was so disgusting.
Reported today, Representative Duncan Hunter, Republican from Alpine, California, scheduled to appear in federal court this morning. He will plead guilty to at least one charge of the 60 criminal charges against him. And he apparently, the announcement was posted Monday morning. And then he was interviewed and said that he will, plead guilty to one of the 60 criminal charges against him. I don't know if that'll be accepted by the court. And he said, there's a good chance I'll spend some time, in prison. The plea I accepted is misuse of my own campaign funds, of which I pled guilty to only one count. I think it's important that people know that I did make mistakes. I did not properly monitor or account for my campaign money. I justify my plea with the understanding that I'm responsible for my own campaign and my own campaign money. The couple, that is Duncan and Margaret Hunter, allegedly spent more than $200,000 in campaign donations on family expenses like vacations, groceries, school lunches, oral surgery. That's a lot of. That's
an indictment of our healthcare system. Another argument for Bernie right there.
Exactly.
You got to embezzle campaign funds for your
$200,000
oral surgery. That's messed up.
What kind of vacations do you take? This is what it says. Vacations, gas, groceries, school lunches, and oral surgery. Now, I have kids. I have 2 kids. I make them lunch every day. And I buy gas. I buy groceries. Oral surgery could be very expensive. But let's say it's $40,000.
Gas might be less in New York than Cali.
Right. Let's say, no, gas is very expensive in New York.
Excuse me, in the city when you don't rely on a car in the same way is my point.
Oral surgery, let's say it costs $40,000. I don't know what kind of oral surgery you have. It costs you $40,000, but it's conceivable.
It's conceivable.
School lunches, $2,500 for a year, maybe.
I have some numbers on those vacations.
Oh yeah, let's hear the vacations.
A family Thanksgiving vacation to Italy, $14,000. A family
Whoa.
vacation to Hawaii, $6,500.
That actually sounds really
kind of
reasonable.
a deal, but flying from California, is cheaper.
I'm smelling first class on a lot of this stuff.
It's a sitting congressman.
Okay, so now we're up to $25,000 plus the $40,000. That's $65,000.
I got more.
Still think he showed his penis to his son?
Let's go.
After all this pampering treatment?
Family vacation to Las Vegas and Boise, $3,700. Family vacation, couple of vacation to Vegas, $2,400.
That was
and
just
then vacations with no prices points to Pittsburgh, London, Lake Tahoe, and DC.
Ooh, that's it. It's the Lake Tahoe.
The
one.
Lake
I think
Tahoe,
probably
no,
the
it's the
big
Pittsburgh.
cash.
And you have no idea how much Pittsburgh.
Well, there you go. Duncan Hunter, again, remind you, there were the first 2 people to endorse Donald Trump were Duncan Hunter and Chris Collins. Both of them now are, Duncan Hunter is, I guess, imminently convicted felon. Chris Collins, convicted, and both no longer in Congress.
But this is part of the Drain the Swamp platform, right? In the kind of like a Robert Redford Sting sort of fashion.
It's exactly.
I'm going to run a president. And
Smoke him out.
It's going to be like
cut him down.
Sting. And then all of the corrupt people.
Smoke him out.
All of the racist
down.
people are going to be exposed.
Smoke him out.
And then Bernie's 2020. We came up with the perfect scenario at the Philly Live show, which was Bernie 2020 and Donald Trump as press secretary.
One other good expense in here. He went to a Pittsburgh Steelers game with several people, and it cost $2,000.
Tickets are expensive.
Gotta get a box. Gotta get a box.
Tickets are expensive.
Calling from a 315 area code. Who's
By the way,
this?
that
Where
was
are
a
you calling
James
from?
Dobson callback joke earlier.
Hey, Sam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, very cool. My name's Colt, and I'm calling from Ohio.
Colt from Ohio. What's on your mind, Colt?
That's right. This is actually pretty funny. I'm in my office currently, so I got to shut the door. I apologize. But basically, my brother is a fan of your show, and I don't know much about your show, so I tuned in for the first time today, and he said libertarians should call in and get roasted, and I'm a libertarian, so I figured I'd give you a buzz.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm glad you've shut the office door. Now, Colt, will you just help me out here? Let's start it this way, because every time I speak to a libertarian, they are a specific type of libertarianism. Will you tell my audience and me what it means to you? Like, what is a libertarian?
What it means to be a libertarian. So basically, it's to me, it's like the opposite of progressivism. Basically, anti-state, generally speaking, just looking for market forces for fixes in the economy and social issues.
Okay, so now are you talking about no state interference in markets and social issues?
It really depends. I mean, again, there's different definitions of libertarianism, much like there's progressivism. I mean,
I guess I'm just asking for what yours is.
Personally, mine would be along the lines of like Ron Paul. I mean, non-aggression principle, freedom of association, stuff like that.
So do you have a problem with
private property rights?
Do you have a problem with income taxes?
Yeah, I view them as immoral. Yeah.
Income taxes are immoral. Are all taxes immoral?
I don't know about all taxes, but definitely an income tax for sure.
Well, now, what makes an income tax immoral?
Well, I guess you have to first start by saying that taxation is theft, and if you're not admitting that, you're not living in reality. That's like the first basic point.
And now, it's theft of what? Your money?
Correct. And moreover,
is it? Let me ask you a question. Is it really your money?
Is my money my money? I think you answered your own question there, Sam.
Can you burn it?
Sure, if you're stupid.
No, but I mean legally?
I mean, if your overlords say you can't and you're breaking a law, I assume not, but you could.
Well, did you print it?
No.
You realize that the reason why that U.S. currency has value is because the U.S. government will only take U.S. currency to pay for taxes. Like, I mean, how do you and I agree on the U.S. dollar as the currency we're going to use?
How do we agree on it? I mean, it's what's out there right there by fiat.
Well, what do you mean out there by fiat? Like it's not like God is making these. The U.S. government is making the dollars. And why does it have value in this country?
Well, it's really subjective. I mean, it's fiat based, right? So the government is a monopoly, and they have a monopoly over our lives. And
Right. They have a monopoly. That's why the money is valuable, because they have a monopoly, because they make the money and then they take it in taxes. And that's the only reason why it has value. And the reason why it has value is because if they don't take it in taxes and they don't have a monopoly of force over whether we pay it in taxes, then it wouldn't have the same value.
Yeah, so you're justifying theft in your own mind, I guess. What's your point?
Well, my point is it's not theft. Because theft is defined.
I mean, this is actually, Sam, to be honest with you, it's not much of a debate. It's definitely theft. I mean, I know some people left of you even to admit that. I mean, eventually you will. Maybe not right now. This conversation on air is kind of embarrassing, I would imagine.
It's embarrassing that I'm not admitting that taxes are theft?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's just true.
Okay. So
what's your next question you got for me?
Well,
I thought this was supposed to be a roast of me, not you. Anyway, go ahead.
It's a good point. I mean, I appreciate that. Now, so your issue is the reason why now why can't you go to the authorities and charge the U.S. government with theft? I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this, because they have an unjust monopoly of force. Is that it?
Well, they do have an unjust monopoly of force, correct. So what about it?
Okay. Well, you're getting very defensive, and I'm just trying to explore this. Okay.
Fire away.
But they print the money. So why don't they get to say what gets done with it?
I don't know. I mean, basically the government is arbitrary by nature. So they just basically create money. They take money where they want to. They print money. They borrow. They steal. They do whatever they want. It's the government.
But so why not? How about this? You can avoid. Why are you making the choice to use U.S. government dollars? I mean, exercise your free will and stop using those dollars. And then they don't have the power to do that.
I mean, my entire retirement is in foreign stocks, foreign currencies.
How did you buy those?
Everything I get away with is not in the dollar.
How'd you buy those?
What's that?
How did you buy those? I mean, I assume you work at a company. Like, why are you accepting payment with American dollars?
Well, it's like the highest paying job I could get in the society we live in.
All right, so you have a problem with the entire structure of our society.
Yeah, I would say so. It's pretty immoral. It produces lemmings like you who think taxation's not theft.
All right. Now, those foreign countries, excuse me, hold on. Those foreign countries that you have assets in, do they tax as well?
Yeah, equally as immoral, I'd say.
So we're starting with the premise that we live in an immoral world because they collect taxes. Correct. And in this immoral world, you have a vision of a world without governments, without currencies. But how would property values get protected?
Well, let me put it to you this way, I guess. So I'm going to explain a little economics to you. So on a continuum, further you go to the right, we'll say, is more liberty and more free markets. And then if you go down the continuum to the left, is more state control and government. So
now that's
the further you
economics?
go down to the left, excuse me?
That's economics?
Yeah, I'm working on it for you. So basically, the more you go to the left, towards what you and your listeners believe, is the more you diminish liberty and freedom, and you basically encumber people with regulations, taxations, just immoral, terrible outcomes. Right. And that's just how it works. That's the world.
All right. Well, that's some. You're throwing some heavy economics on me. But
that's right. Pretty devastating to your psyche there, pal. Anyway, keep going. Fire away. These are pretty softballs. Actually, come to think of it, I think you had Dave Smith and Mark Flair. Some of these libertarian types are pretty popular in the community and I think they did a pretty disservice to libertarians because your questions really triggered them. I'm glad we have the reverse of that going on in this conversation. So
yes,
keep them coming, man.
Okay, I will. So who's going to now? You think property values? You said property values are the most important rights. Who is going to protect those rights in your stateless society?
Who's going to protect property rights? You're saying?
Yeah, you own a house. Let's say I don't know how you ended up getting that house in this stateless society. Who's going to protect that house?
The person who owns the property.
Okay, so let's say let's personalize it. You own a house, and I come to take your house. What are you going to do?
I would tell you don't take my house, and then if you escalate it further, we'd do some different things. I mean.
Okay, well, what if I come with what if I come with like 10 guys with guns, and I say, get out, I want the house.
Right, so you're assuming that there's no court systems that you're getting at?
Well, I'm asking. I'm not assuming anything. I'm asking you to explain to me what happens, because who sets up the courts if there's a court system? I mean, you just told me you want...
So Sam, I just fed you your question for you, so without the courts, right? So basically, this is the point. Libertarian societies, the question really is, absent the government takeover something, what happens? And that's the question libertarians have to struggle with answering, because leftists are intellectually lazy. They basically say the government does everything, what would we do without it? So the point is this. There is voluntary arbitration and mediation out there that is far more efficient and successful than the private active court systems. So basically, down that continuum, you see more of that. You see less of the government.
I just went through an arbitration system with my ex-wife, and in the arbitration agreement, there is a provision that if the arbitration is violated or we have a question of it, we would go to a court. Here's the thing that I don't understand. And I'm trying not to assume anything. I'm asking you, in your vision of a world without a state, where there is no monopoly of force, and I've gone to arbitration, or I've taken your house, it's incumbent upon you to tell my audience, these lemmings, what society is going to be like in your world. And I can tell you, in every arbitration proceedings that has ever happened, there is a provision that says, in the event that there is some question as to whether or not this arbitration is binding, ultimately it will go to court.
Yeah, so are you done? Do you want me to respond or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically you said you predicated this little harangue you went on by saying you assumed nothing. Well, first of all, you assumed that I said there would be a stateless society in my world, but if you want to go down that road, I can say that.
Should there not be a stateless society? You tell me. You just said that all the states are immoral, and I just wanted to. So tell me what there would be.
They are. In lieu of the court system, you're saying?
No, I'm saying like I've given you a sense. I've given you a scenario where you and I have a conflict, and you say that there are certain rights that you think should be protected. I'm asking you, how are those rights protected?
Yeah, so in a minarchist version of libertarianism, there is a government apparatus, and then in a full-blown anarchist, it's just purely the voluntary court system to arbitration, mediation, what have you, whatever there's.
Which one are you? I'm asking for your opinion.
My opinion of what it should look like?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I guess the first thing I would say before I give my opinion, because it's important to reference it this way. So the reason society is the way it is there always has to be somebody in charge and always has to be somebody in power in terms of what Democratic voters think, right? So people like left, especially, they like to say we need a certain person in charge, and by all means, if we get the right person, everything.
Why do you have to keep characterizing what the left thinks? Forget what the left thinks. I know what the left thinks. I talk about that stuff all day. Why don't you tell me what you think?
Of what the court system look like again? Yeah.
What anything would look like. Why won't you just, I'm literally asking you the least loaded question possible, which is, give me your vision for society. You think our society today, that our government steals your money.
Yeah, I can give you that. Yeah, I can give you, so despite your shouting, it's a little bit muffled. I can give you my vision of society. So basically, what it would be is voluntary interaction, basically, which is just the market economy, right? I mean, people talk about greedy capitalists. At the end of the day, it's just voluntary consumption and voluntary production. I would just look for mostly that, and everything to be decentralized. So the point is this: there's the theory of subsidiarity, which basically means if a single individual can't handle something on their own, then they look to their family, then they look to churches, they look to nonprofits, municipalities, localities, they move on up. The problem is, like, the great Leviathan we have, the federal government, is what people like Bernie Sanders and his whole charade look to solve all the problems. And we really just need rapid decentralization. I mean, we really don't need a country like the United States at all. I mean, we have different cultural areas that need to be represented differently, and the top-down approach.
So like feudalism.
What's that?
Well, you're talking about a completely decentralized country with sort of almost like little fiefdoms. And I'm still asking you, we still have the same problem. Who is going to, you're saying everything is voluntary. Well, that's fine, but presumably you're going to enter into contracts. They can be voluntary, but people have disagreements all the time in contracts that they enter voluntarily. Who will adjudicate that?
The arbitration mediation setup within that.
And what if I decide not to abide by the arbitration mediation? Do they have a police force?
Yeah, and this is where Dave and I can answer the questions. I'm not afraid to answer them because they're more difficult. Like I said,
I know everybody else sucked. You're the best. But listen, I'm asking you. Someone has a monopoly of force in your system, correct? Right? Or is it just that we have competing armies and the strongest one wins?
There is no monopoly of force. I appreciate you cutting me off, I guess. Do you want me to answer the question about the private security, I guess? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So basically, think of it this way. Local police jurisdictions who basically just show up after the fact accidents and issues anyway, don't really do much. Those type of people, you could just say, per household, how much money is this payroll hitting each household? And you take that money and you allow it to be in the hands of people who set up their own private security systems on their own property. And that's basically it. Pretty simple.
Okay. So it's feudalism, what you're talking about. I will have my fiefdom.
I don't know the definition of feudalism. That's your term, not mine.
Okay, well, let's look it up here for a second.
Related, so for people who are non-property owners, because in feudalism, serfs would work the land for feudal lords. Is that how non-property owners would like get by? Is that what they would do?
Who would be living? I mean, what do you mean non-property owners?
I mean non-property owners. Most people in the world don't own property. You're aware of that, right?
Sure, man. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, so what would, in your ideal fantasy universe that you're building, what would they do? Would they work the land? I'm getting, because this is actually...
Well, the wealthy people would have their own armies or their own paramilitaries or police forces.
Right.
A lot of right? And they would all... And so if you and I went to arbitration and I felt you broke it and you felt like you didn't break our agreement, then it would really just be resolved by if my paramilitary force was better than yours, and then I would win.
Yeah, so... You guys mind if I respond? There's a lot here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so first, just a little educate you guys a little more. So basically, there's a difference between society and government, right? And you guys are in this mentality that, like, government needs to do everything. And you keep saying if the arbitration didn't work out. You keep saying the arbitration didn't work out as if, like, that's the end-all, be-all. I mean, there could be different levels of arbitration, mediation throughout this voluntary world that we're talking about here. There's nothing wrong with that.
I'm not sure. Wait a second. I'm sorry. Honestly, I'm sorry. I'm pretty familiar with the world of arbitration and mediation, and I don't understand, and I'm being very sincere here. I don't understand what you mean that there are different levels of mediation arbitration. Are you saying that if we go to the first round of arbitration, we come to an agreement, we both sign this agreement, we have a contract, I feel you violated it. We go to another arbitration. You feel that you didn't. Maybe we get it resolved there, and then you violate it, or I feel you violated it afterwards. At one point, there has to be a backstop. There has to be someone who says, this is how we're going to enforce this contract.
So, basically, like I said, I mean, so... For people who are just living in residential communities or what have you, or apartments, maybe they belong to HOAs because they'd be a lot more prolific, where there's waste management and, management of their roads and properties, internally through self-governments in those communities. I mean, the tops of those communities can interact with other communities, and that's really the stepping stone for the levels of arbitration. Ultimately, if it goes up to the, fantasy world, you guys are talking about Supreme Court, and the decision is unjust. Well, I mean, look around the system we have today. There's a lot of unjust decisions being made.
Who appoints the Supreme Court in your world?
What's that?
Who appoints the Supreme Court in your world?
Well, it depends what the rules of the communities are. There wouldn't be one giant country of 350 million people screaming about we need Medicare for all. It'd probably be small micro communities, which makes more sense. Hence my decentralization argument earlier.
Yeah, no, I know the decentralization, but I'm saying in the case of conflicts, of arguments,
right?
Who resolves it?
Themselves, people doing it. If not, they go to their voluntary or private arbitration mediation outlets. Whatever happens, it depends what's going on in the HOAs or the strip malls or whatever.
Who supports these HOAs? Deb, do you belong to an HOA?
I personally don't.
Okay, I've belonged to things like that. I owned a co-op apartment at one point. Okay.
Sure.
Now, if I violate the rules of the co-op, okay, the co-op board can say we're going to evict you, and I could say no, you're not. I'm going to stay here because I happen to know all you people on this co-op board, and you're weak. You cannot evict me.
Right.
I can physically beat you up. And they say, no, we're going to call the police. And then the police come and they have a monopoly of force. And they say, you've got to leave the premises. But in your scenario, what happens? The co-op has its own private police force. But what if I have my own private police force that fights that private police force because there is no overall law. There's no one who has.
Living in a co-op if you have your own private police force. But I mean, the bottom line is this. I mean, you can still have voluntary contracts. You can still have decentralized security. You can have all of those things that the world actually already has, despite government takeovers and everything, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, but they're all enforced by government.
You're not getting too far.
They're all enforced by a government that has a monopoly of force.
Sure, it's not moral. It's what's going on. Yeah, you're stating the obvious. Congratulations.
Well, all right. Well, thank you.
Hey, can I give you? I don't know. You know. Hey, look. I'm sorry. I want this to do this myself. I think that we should have a world where Lula is president of the Southern Hemisphere and Cone, as well as North America. All problems are arbitrated by me in Brooklyn. No, hey, listen, don't be intellectually lazy. I'm building my own fantasy universe. But in all seriousness, hey, whoa.
Do you mind?
In all seriousness, can you look up two things? Read about the 1850s in Europe, because there's actually a reason, even just economically, that the system you want, which is some form of feudalism, broke down. And that's what happened. Basically, cities started getting built with industrialization. And then for a more modern version of what you're interested in, look up Cali, Colombia in the 1990s and how that cartel ran the city.
I'm actually writing this down because I'm a dispassionate listener. Do you mind if I do my final plug here before you throw me off the phone?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So basically just two things. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm definitely going to follow the show. My brother actually listens all the time. I think he's actually in medical school right now. He's just a hell of a lot smarter than I am. But couple things. I got a podcast I just fired up about libertarianism. I know you guys don't want to promote that. It's called Millennials Meet Liberty. And then additionally, I just want to...
Millennials Meet Liberty. Is that on iTunes?
What's that?
Millennials Meet Liberty?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be awesome if you guys could, like, I don't care if you guys just trash it and write terrible reviews or whatever, as long as people are listening to it. And then if do you mind if I just do one last thing, say 30 seconds of your time?
Sure, of course.
Yeah, so basically, in the beginning of time, just human civilization is very primitive, and there was wars, and there was fighting, and there's terrible things going on. And through voluntary cooperation and capitalism, as in billions of people have been lifted out of poverty. And I think that's really, really important for people to realize. And as nations become very wealthy, the people at the top like to look around and sensationalize a few people at the bottom and use it to strong-arm the electorate by promising free things and by running deficits and by doing really immoral things. So I want your listeners to realize that Bernie Sanders is probably the most immoral candidate running for president in 2020. And that's all I got.
Let me just ask you one more question, Colt. You're millennial. Give me just your age range, just so I have a sense of like what we got going
28.
on. 28. And that's Millennials for Liberty or Freedom? Which one was it?
Millennials Meet Liberty.
Okay. All right, Colt.
That's
well,
a
good
good
luck
title.
with your thing. And do not hesitate to call back in at some other time.
That's a clever name, legit. I like that. Can we find another
Yeah,
case
fun.
of somebody
I
dying
really
from medical
appreciate it. Thank
debt
you very much.
so we can exploit them for the greater immoral? Does anybody have a story of a kid getting ripped off of their medication so we can sensationalize for immoral purposes? Thank you.
All right.
I think the surge,
thanks,
the numbers really started to change when we could find more immiserated people who really are.
Every dollar that I tax a high frequency trade and it's directed to education, I get off on the immorality.
I get off on the pure fucking immorality of it. That Wall Street money turned to a free college. It makes me hard. It's so sick. It's so wrong.
I'm trying to like look up. Jesus. All right.
And then you get rid of medical debt and you invest it in green jobs. You know how depraved that is?
I'm gonna be so bad.
We're gonna be so
Now hold on.
sick.
I should know this off the top of my head, but theft. The definition of theft is to steal something. The definition of stealing is to take without permission or legal right. Now, here's the problem. Here's the problem with Colt's perspective on this. Law is a function of government. It is It is a function of government. It is law can only be enforced. It's not voluntary. It's law. You can either voluntarily comply with the law or not, but law is not voluntary. It is a law.
What's hilarious?
It means that there will be consequences, legal consequences if you do it. The law is set up by government. If the government passes a law that says taxation is legal, guess what? It's legal. Now, you could say it's immoral. You should not be able to set up a currency that you then disseminate and create value by taxing it. You could say that's immoral, and I don't know. It's a function of your system of morality.
Is there any way we could cover more people with health care?
But it's just a fact. It's just a fact. It's not theft. It is not theft. That is a fact. You can say that it's immoral for governments to pass laws that say you can tax. But that's, in my mind, silly, because if they didn't tax, then the money that you have in your pocket would be worthless.
You know what I'd like? More public bike paths funded by taxing billionaires so that average middle-class people can enjoy public spaces. The rush. The pure amorality of it. Shame me for it. Shame me.
This is important to note. Hold on, we got to get to this. We don't have much time left. This True News. Here's a True News reporter traveling to London as part of the White House press corps. Let's look at this guy. True News, White House press corps. True News is a online news organization. Is that right, or is it cable? I'm not sure, but let's take a look. It's this guy Rick Wiles and his correspondent, who is part of the official White House press corps, Edward Zoll.
I saw the photograph of your desk in the NATO press room, and very, very proud of you and True News that you're right there with all the big news media organizations of the world. You're representing the kingdom of God, and everybody who supports True News. We're all very proud of what you're doing on behalf of True News and the kingdom of God, and we know you will represent God's kingdom very well at the NATO summit.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Rick. I will. I'll do you proud.
All right. Edward Zoll.
All right. Now, look, this is the reason why I play this is because it's not because this guy wanted to work in the kingdom of God 14 times within a 30-second hit. And not just because it's a certain amount of like self-promotion. Look, it's a big deal. We are a similar type of, operation here. If, sent Brendan to, and he got permission from the White House Media Communications Center to be part of the pool, because that's how you get in. It is very difficult. They vet you. They're not going to just let anybody in. They check you out to make sure that you are legit. It is a source of pride. I would be very prideful. And that's why Rick Wiles there was expressing that type of pride with this guy. I saw your desk in there. You're in NATO. Rick also has a theory about impeachment that it was presented on True News. This was it must have been a couple of weeks ago. Last week. So a week before the White House press corps admitted a True News correspondent.
That's the way the Jews work. They are deceivers. They plot, they lie, they do whatever they have to do to accomplish their political agenda. This impeach Trump movement is a Jew coup. And the American people better wake up to it really fast, because this thing is moving now towards a vote in the House and then a trial in the Senate. We could have a trial before Christmas. This country could be in civil war at Christmas time.
That's right.
Members of the U.S. military are going to have to take a stand, just like they did in the 1860s with the Civil War. They're going to have to decide, are you fighting for the North or the South? Members of the government are going to have to take a side. Instead of North, South, it's going to be left or right. People are going to be forced, possibly by this Christmas, to take a stand because of this Jew coup in the United States. We have weeks to stop it. That's why I'm speaking out. That's why I'm putting everything on the line, saying this is a coup led by Jews to overthrow the constitutionally elected president of the United States. And it's beyond removing Donald Trump. It's removing you and me.
There we go. You will not replace us on some level. All right. There you have it, folks. I mean, this is the idea that those people vetting the reporters in the White House, press corps, are not aware of that. And I suspect, we haven't really dug deeper, but I suspect that's not the first time he's introduced that concept. That would be quite a thing to spring on your audience.
Yeah, I'm just going to start workshopping. I mean, that's literally Hitlerian. And also, I mean...
Hilarious.
Right-wing, you know, I say it as a joke, but I legitimately mean it. There's only one place in the world that right-wing authoritarianism is safe for Jews. Israel. Like, I don't know what people who, you know, I see people, not many, most Jews obviously overwhelmingly do not support Republicans, but when I see people who share any kind of Jewish background supporting Donald Trump, and even just from a place of self-interest, say they're, you know, they're bigots, they don't care about Muslims, immigrants, whatever. If you don't think that this is coming to you, you're delusional.
Yeah,
there's no way it doesn't.
I don't care what his grandkid, what Ivanka Trump is. The bottom line is he's surrounded himself with people who are going to exploit this. And in the same way, even if you think that Donald Trump is the biggest lover of folks of the Hebraic faith, the fact is that he is playing with fire, and he thinks he can contain it.
And conspiracy theories without, you know, structural underpinnings, usually that's where they go. And it is, I mean, it is interesting. Like, you do, I mean, obviously I'm not a fan of Nadler and Schiff, but I'm just seeing it right now. It's like, there's so much unconscious prejudice you could play off against those guys. I mean, I know it's obvious, but that's
all right.
Jesus.
We're going to take one more phone call, then I'm going to do some IMs. And it really is, the idea of a civil war during Christmas would be sad. That's the time you really don't want it.
Nobody wants it at that time.
It's so much more suited towards...
One thing he's not considering is that, you told me this last week, Sam, is that Hanukkah is also happening over the course of the Christmas holiday.
Well, that's
so
why... That's
why I don't think it'll happen.
Well,
I think
it's okay for Hanukkah to not pass over.
Guess who saw through my veiled ploy to avoid a civil war during Hanukkah by pretending I was concerned about it during Christmas? You saw right through me. Sneaky Sam, as we call me.
Sneaky
Calling
Sam.
From a 501.
Spin of the dreidel.
Calling from a 501 area code. 501.
Hey, Sam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You are the final caller of the day.
Okay,
yes,
cool.
I can hear you. Yes.
Awesome. So I wanted to talk to you.
Who is
Stephen
this?
From Arkansas, by the way.
Who is it?
Stephen from Arkansas.
Stephen from Arkansas.
Hey, I wanted to talk to you about the Second Amendment and specifically the case out of New York that the Supreme Court heard oral arguments for yesterday. And I think if you read the conventional wisdom online, that everybody seems the case is going to be dismissed because it's now moot. New York State, as I'm pretty sure you're probably aware, preempted the city's restrictions.
Okay.
And Justice Alito, what's really alarming about the oral arguments is Justice Alito and Justice Gorsuch both seem to not only want to keep this case alive, but want to expand the scope of the Second Amendment to gun possession outside the home. Justice Alito actually said this explicitly twice during oral arguments. And I think that anybody that believes that Justice Roberts is going to be the voice of reason in this case is deluding themselves.
Well, he's certainly
So I think
supposedly being set up as the fulcrum, but yeah.
Right. So I think that even if this case is dismissed, that we should all be extremely concerned about the way the court is headed, especially on this issue, because the idea that you would have a fundamental right to carry around guns is just extremely concerning. And I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Well, I agree. I mean, I would put this in, I mean, you know, the other day we talked about the idea of non-delegation, right? And there was some hint that Kavanaugh was going to join the four conservatives in the in finding that Congress cannot delegate to executive agencies large ability to determine how to execute the broad principles that they pass in the form of laws. I think that, like, for every one of that dynamic where we're about to see a wholesale change in some fundamental interpretation of our law, I think that's going to happen across the board. I think that's going to happen on some measure in terms of a woman's sovereignty over her own body. I think it's inevitable. I don't know if it's going to happen now, and I would agree with you. I suspect that right now is not the time that John Roberts wants to make this decision, and so he will probably join the four, you know, left of center, at least in the context of the court, judges in dismissing this case. But I think that, like, all of this is in our future. There's just, you know, I mean, short of something non-actuarial happening, all of this is in our future. And by that, I mean, like, somebody who's in their 50s having a heart attack that happens to be, you know, on the conservative side of the thing. You know, I mean, all of this is in our future. I do not think there is an individual on that court who's going to limit anything. I think John Roberts may slow the roll for some things a little bit, but he's got a long career, and I think he's going to deliver on everything that the right wants as a political matter. I just think that he may, if anything, you know, maybe do it in a pacing that is going to be a little bit slower than people suspect. But again, this Supreme Court, you know, at the very least, I don't think you're going to see Thomas retire for, you know, 10 years minimum. And there's a lot of damage that can be done in those 10 years. And that's presuming that there won't be a Republican in office when he does. And that also presumes that, you know, Ginsburg and Breyer will make it until the next Democratic president. I mean, it's, you know, I've been saying this for years. It's a shit show, and it's going to be, you know, but I appreciate the call.
Hey, thanks so much, Sam.
All right. We should have, maybe we should do like a roundup of all, you know, the thing is that when you hear the oral arguments, it's very difficult to tell. But we should probably do a roundup of all the sort of the cases that are going to be resolved in June. I don't know when they would dismiss this. I imagine they would dismiss it earlier than June. But the idea that that the Supreme Court is going to review this case is a little bit disturbing. And this is, to be clear, this is New York City has a prohibition on carrying a licensed, locked, and unloaded handgun outside the city limits. They just don't want guns traveling in and outside the city. I think they rescinded that decision or something, I think. I got to look more into it. All right. Folks, that's it for our phone calls for the day. And let's go. We're going to do a couple of IMs, and then we're going to get out of here. Rube Davin. Hey, Sam, when discussing politics with Pete fans, I think I'm going to say he supports welfare programs while Warren and Sanders support universal social programs. Considering how much people hate the term welfare. Yeah, that's a good point. Tom from Minnesota?
To reify that hatred of welfare.
Yeah, that's probably true, too. Tom from Minnesota. Has Sam seen Ryan Doeffler's University of Chicago law professor article in Jacobin critiquing the feasibility of the day one agenda? Thoughts? I have not. There is if it centers around the non-delegation issue, there was a similar piece written by, in that same thing, but no, I will take a look at it. Betsy DeVos, having a difficult time paying attention to your words saying this morning because I just joined Austin DSA and I'm getting stoked to canvass for Heidi Sloan.
Heidi's good.
Connecticut Comrade. Hey, I'm our crew. Apropos of your conversation today about media critique, did you hear that Bernie being entirely omitted from PBS's recent Democratic primary 2020 candidates video segment, despite covering candidates with little or no following? Klobuchar, that's amazing.
I mean, it's so and he's been
it's
in the
bizarre.
top 3 the whole time, and now is surging.
It's bizarre.
It's obvious. Well,
Trumpy bear.
It is what it is.
Question of the day. Are they talking about Harris or Warren? Pajama Boy. How does Klobuchar continue to qualify for the debates? Also, Sam, you're looking like a salt and pepper snack. Thank you. I don't know how to respond to that. Klobuchar, I don't know that she'll qualify for the next one. Maybe. Brock from VA, I put in a good amount of time volunteering to collect ballot petition signatures to get Bernie on the ballot, but I'm not going to be able to make the VA celebration meeting tomorrow. But I want to thank y'all for getting me politically activated about a year ago. I could probably still be only listening to comedy podcasts and Sam Harris if you didn't. Excellent. John from Houston, I think you're being way too generous to Warren. Her motivating emotion is cynicism. A highly educated friend of mine said this weekend that I know everybody wants single-payer health care, but there are no good options. This friend knows I have the threat of medical bankruptcy hanging over my head. Liberals have crossed over from cynical realism of Obama's don't let the perfect enemy be the enemy of the good to the nihilism of there's no such thing as the good. I don't know where you get from Warren that you can say, I think that her 2-step process of getting to Medicare for all is destined to failure. But I don't think she's out there arguing against single payer in the way you're talking about.
I want to just defend the guy's sentiment, but I don't want to get into the whole argument. I mean, I don't care what adjectives one uses about her one way or another, but I think that the idea that you're going to propose the most radical part of that plan the third year of your presidency, right before re-election, and presumably you've lost seats, I think it's delusional or disingenuous would be the words that I would use, frankly. But
who do you think she was trying to fool with that?
I don't know if she was trying to. I mean, fool is.
Well, I mean, if it's disingenuous, I mean,
okay, I think if it's disingenuous, it's not a serious plan, but she still wants to maintain the brand that she had created as a Medicare for All supporter, or it's delusional, which is like that is something that could actually happen, which is frankly more where I would go, and I find that more disturbing than the cynicism.
Okay, well that's different. You could say that like I think it is politically unfeasible.
Totally unfeasible. I think she had said, she made a choice when she said so many times, I'm with Bernie, that if she explicitly was not with Bernie,
but you
that
realize,
would be
like,
problematic.
The argument that you're making, and I tend to agree with it, is exactly what like Matt Iglesias would say about Bernie's proposal, which is that it's completely disingenuous to say that you're going to get Joe Manchin because you're going to go and do some campaign rallies in West Virginia to get Joe Manchin to vote for single payer. Or that in the event that there's a
theory of change. I mean, look, if Elizabeth Warren
but wait a second.
had said, no, it's not, because I don't buy that comparison for a second. It's one thing to say it's a radically difficult thing to do which has been untested, but you've built a clear momentum and a clear argument for decades, versus I'm introducing a whole other pipe dream function that would be even
her
harder
argument
to pull
would be,
off.
look, once you've got everybody under the age of 18 covered, and once you have everybody who has no insurance covered, up to 200% of poverty, you're talking now close to 80% of the country, including 50-year-olds going into Medicare. You're talking like 80% of the country. And the idea that to bring along the other 20%, I don't know.
And phase out private insurance.
Yeah,
and,
I don't
and
listen.
Hold that coalition together for two different healthcare fights. Come on.
That argument does not seem radically more delusional than you're going to get Bennett in Colorado, and you're going to get Manchin, and you're going to get Kristen Sinema, and you're going to get Sally McAdams.
Well, it's just more technocratic and less, conflictual. And
I mean, that's really the bottom line.
But it's also, I would say, Matt Iglesias would say.
I know what Matt.
Well, he would say that's delusional.
Matt Iglesias.
I'm just saying that it is analogous critique. It's like saying because you're telling me
because I think that because there is an actual
one is politically delusional and the other is arguably politically delusional, and you can choose which one you want to say is arguable.
Well, no, because the difference is you're operating in one scenario is you're taking a moonshot. You're saying everything is not working. All of the cards are stacked. The system is totally done.
And you're maintaining a bargaining position.
And you're saying what we literally have, and this is a left-wing analysis of power of any kind, from the progressives to, obviously Marx, which is like you put bodies on the ground and you pressure the hell out of people and you see what you can do to block and politically I'm trying to think of the right adjective, to make it really, really, really hard for people. That's the Bernie theory of change. We've tried a lot of other things that haven't worked, and that may well not work. It's still infinitely more persuasive and more internally coherent than all of those things are true, but also somehow we're going to still have this kind of like Rube Goldberg process in terms of technocracy that's going to satisfy everybody. That doesn't make it. I mean, there could totally be a scenario where Bernie pushes for Medicare for all. No matter what he does, the interests are too powerful, and Sinema and Manchin, everybody kill it. Although I do think my guess would be, because now we're all just talking hypotheticals, is that the worst case scenario that he's putting forward is the case that gets us to something like Warren's first part of her plan actually passing.
I agree.
And so but this other, like, I think you have to decide 100%. This is not a conciliatory. It is an aggressive process from the outside, and everybody could say. I mean, look, the least delusional people are people like Kristen Sinema, if we want to use delusional in that language, in that level. Sure, like on some level, it's likely absolutely nothing will happen. And you know what? If nothing happens, then we're going to have a complete societal collapse. But I don't think that thread can be. I don't think you can circle that square. And Warren's trying to do that with a two-parter. And whether we call it disingenuous or delusional, I mean, I'm less attached to. Obviously, you're more of a fan of hers, than I am.
No,
it's not a terribly relevant conversation. Hopefully,
I am, I think, more of a fan of hers than you are. But I also I am critical of that
you didn't
proposal.
Support that proposal.
No,
right.
of course not.
Yeah.
But I think that's a difference. I think there's a long way. The distance between that, still fundamentally supporting the idea. Now, presenting a plan that I think may be a non-starter is problematic, but that's different than saying Medicare, for those who want it.
I would say this, though. I think if Warren's coalition looked a bit more like Bernie's and not ended up looking like Clinton's, I don't think she would have had this Medicare for all like two-step process. I think she would have just been more.
I agree. But
totally
who's
true.
to say that if we're looking at a vacuum now with two candidates who are between 16 and 20 points in the Democratic primary. where they are, in August of 2020 is going to be a different place.
Now, what I just saw, which we don't have time to get to, was Joe Biden saying that Pete Buttigieg stole his healthcare plan.
Yeah, I know, that's true. The ghost in the server. Lieutenant Pete is not retreating. He's just advancing in a different direction. Darth Payne. The surest indicator that Donald Trump is going to have a hard time in 2020 is the reemergence of libertarian callers. Love it. I think there's something to that. Dolink. State Department David Hale today testified against conspiracy theory that Ukraine muddled in 2016 election. New revelations re Pompeo contact with Nunes and Giuliani regarding the smear of Ukraine ambassador to air on C-SPAN 2 at 8 p.m. tonight. Interesting. Glass-Steagall. Get him to define theft. Yes. Michigan redneck. I've been spending 2 weeks at home visiting Michigan, a country that voted overwhelming for Trump in 2016. I have the same feeling for 2020 I had in 2016 when Bernie won the Dem primary, but the nomination went to Hillary, only worse. Michigan is an aging state. If there isn't a candidate that pushes for either Medicare for all or free university loan forgiveness, Trump will carry Michigan again. This is because the olds are terrified of Bernie and Warren's communism and will vote for Trump no matter what. And if the under 30 crowd has nothing to gain, they won't turn out. But I'm pretty worried if Michigan is a Bernie or bust, that Michigan is a Bernie or bust state. Look, the bottom line is this election, I think in the general, is going to be won by the margins. And so you need somebody who's going to bring in marginal voters. And someone like Buttigieg and Biden, they're not going to do that. A Square. Hello, MR. Catching up on the shows and live now. What is that? A libertarian on the phone? Sweet. Need a palate cleanser from that depressing but important interview today. That recap on Kavanaugh's stared position on federal agencies defanging. Sam, sad that Hayes producers are not devoting more time to primaries, but more for negatives on Sanders. So little on topics you've been covering. That's why I'm a cedarista por siempre. Gracias. Patrick. The things Mike can get away with when Jamie is out of the office. I don't know. Rom Kami 1, Evil Bernie is killing me. Laugh my ass off. Captain Kangaroo, Michael's commentary, Michael hates capitalism until it hits his Patreon page. Bert and Bernie bro. Disappointed with the quantity of libertarian callers lately. Sam versus Devil's Advocate Sam would be a much more level playing field, plus funnier and more interesting debate. Please consider. Geezer, I think Christmas is the best time of year for Civil War. Everyone looks pretty. Disco Stew, all the highbrow analyzing a conservative judge's legal opinions are really a waste of time. Barr would change his opinion if a Dem were president. These are just fascists. Matt from Mass, yo, the right-wing libertarians give me a bad name, Sam. My guy, wage is much more theft. In terms of labor theft and tax, corporations and wealthy are the actual enemies of liberty. They keep saying government will enslave you, but the only people who held slaves were private individuals. It's ludicrous. Congressional baseball fan noticed our new friend Colt is afraid of the socialist war on Thanksgiving, so I wrote him a song to the tune of John Lennon's Imagine. Imagine no more turkeys and no more stuffing or mashed potatoes too. No reason to argue with your libertarian uncle for an hour or two. Imagine eating tamales, tacos, and menudo instead of the whitest of white people food. They may say I'm a dreamer, but I know I'm not the only one. And the final I am of the day. I think the fundamental delusion with the Warren healthcare plan is the idea that you can unify a movement around such a clunky legislative agenda. Right. You'll need social movements to get either Medicare for all or public option, but there's no such social movement for the latter.
I think you're totally right.
I agree. I just don't think it's right to say public option, but I think to amass that twice is asking too much. All right, folks, see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid.